Okay, so this week we're on to chapter 8 and we're talking about sampling. So the big key thing with sampling and statistics and research methods is we often want to find out information about an entire population. So we want to find out maybe the extent to which people drink and drive in the United States, or even maybe here at KSU. How many KSU students drink and drive? Well, rather than ask every single student at KSU how much they drink and drive, what we try to do is we try to create a sample of students that we're going to ask. And we do this through a way that allows us to then generalize the responses that we got from our sample to the entire population here at KSU or the United States or the state of Georgia, whatever you're interested in. And so that's what we do when we're doing research. It saves us a lot of time and money, is one of the big reasons to do that. Is if you went and asked everybody in the whole country why they did this, or how much they did something, it would be very costly. We only really do that with the census, and that is a lot of money, right? So anyway, the main logic of this probability sampling is that it allows us to generalize our findings. It has to be representative, though. We don't want to go and pull a sample from Georgia Southern and then try to apply that to KSU, right? Because that wouldn't make any sense. So conscious and unconscious sampling bias or something that we can have. We want to try to eliminate these things. We never want to have bias in anything in research methods. We want things to be objective and unbiased. So sampling elements, the population obviously is the whole group, so it would be students at KSU, and then you'd have your population parameters, your sample statistics, things like that, that get more into the nitty-gritty stuff. Um, the key to the process is the random selection, because if you randomly select people, then there should be a good ability for that to be representative of the population. If you just pick people that happen to be closest to you, or maybe sampled one class here at KSU, you couldn't really apply that to everybody, or even possibly even the whole criminal justice major. So you want to do that. And first thing you have to do is select your sampling frame. And so that's would be, in our example, the undergrad or maybe even all students here at KSU, right? Um, and then from that, you want to estimate your sampling error to determine kind of to what degree are you willing to be wrong about this. And that's going to determine kind of how many people you need to pull into your sample. Do you just want 10 people? If you do that, then chances are it's not going to be that representative and you're going to have a lot of standard error, very high standard error, so to speak. But if you used maybe 3,000 people, that would probably be much better if you're trying to sample people here at KSU. There's a level of confidence and the specified interval, and that gets into your confidence intervals because you would have hopefully a confidence interval of about 95% that you can generalize your findings to the population, but of course there's going to be some error in there. And usually that's about 5%, and so that's split on either side of whatever your findings are. That it could be some margin of error, right? And so you want to have that as high as possible, not have too much margin for error, but obviously different samples have different issues. Um, so simple random sampling is simply that. It's very simple. You just randomly select. It's essentially like getting a big bowl and putting every student's name into it, and then randomly just picking some students out of it, or whatever, criminals, whatever you're interested in studying, from that hat or bowl, and those are the people that you randomly pick. Systematic sampling, that would be, these are all just different types of sampling. So say we go through and we have a phone book, and we pick every fifth person in that phone book to be in our sample, and then the other people aren't. So this is a systematic way of picking people. Stratified sampling is another method, and this enables you to possibly account for differences in the population. So, for instance, if we had a sample maybe where we had, well, we wanted to account for the fact that most people who are students at KSU are probably between the age of 18 and 25. So say 80% of those are 80% of students are between 18 and 25. Well, we want to account for that and make sure that 80% of our sample is between 80 or 18 and 25, and then the other 20% can be 25 or older or something like that. And so that's a way that we might account for that. Another method is multi-stage cluster sampling. And so what we might do is we might decide, well, we're going to randomly select different classrooms or different majors here at KSU, and that's going to be one level of randomly selecting people. And then within that classroom or major here at KSU, we're going to then randomly select people within that classroom to be able to survey in our instrument. So here's an example of the National Crime Victimization Survey. They really want to represent the nationwide population of persons living in households. And so the first thing they do is they define primary sampling units, which are largely automatically included. Smaller ones are stratified. And so if you think about a primary sampling unit, the Atlanta metro area would be what is called a PSU, a primary sampling unit. And then within that, you might figure out different clusters of housing units. So maybe you might have some people from Kennesaw, you might have some people from Marietta or the different areas within that PSU. You might have some people from downtown Atlanta, things like that. British Crime Survey is another example. 289 parliamentary constituencies, they're stratified, and then 2 sample points are selected. The first one was in disproportionate sampling was conducted to obtain a greater number of inner city respondents. So this gets at kind of your stratified sampling, right? We want a disproportionate sample so that way it's broken up across these 4 segments at random, but that way we're able to match the population and account for these things. There's also some other things with non-probability sampling. These are things that cannot be generalized to the larger population. These are usually regarding your convenience samples. So if you just went into a classroom and surveyed that classroom, or snowball sampling, which is often happens with drug use and things like that, where maybe, or homeless populations, where you ask one person some questions and then they give you some information on another person that you can go and interview and things like that. These are helpful for getting access to these harder to get to populations, such as drug users and these different subcultures. However, obviously they're not generalizable to the entire population. Some other examples are reliance or quota sampling. So you just pick a certain number of people, and then once you've hit your quota, you say, okay, we're done. And then purposive sampling is selecting a sample on the basis of your judgment and the purpose of your study. As you can see, these are probably not as scientific and reliable as your probability sampling designs. So when you think about designing your research projects for this paper, for this class, you probably want to think about using a probability sample and explaining how you're going to conduct that, how you're going to do it, and all that other stuff. Then again, there could be some instances when you might be forced to use a snowball sample, such as you want to examine homelessness or something like that. Then you wouldn't have any choice, and you'd want to justify these things. So anyway, that's about all I had to say about sampling, and we're going to talk about survey research next module, so it might make a little bit more sense about the sampling once you figure out this about surveys and giving those out. So we'll talk about that next week. Please don't forget to take your quiz and do your discussion boards as well, and I will talk to you next week.